Hey TNT, what's up? It's Pastor Noah here. I'm excited for another week of the TNT lesson online. I hope that you've been able to get outside and enjoy this beautiful weather that we've been having. Unseasonably warm, but awesome. I love this time of year where we get to see things that have been just dormant and dead for the whole winter just sort of come back to life. It's an awesome picture of Jesus and how he died and was put in the tomb and then came back to life, was resurrected. We're going to celebrate that in a couple weeks on Easter Sunday, and so I'm looking forward to that for sure. But this week we're looking at section 3.6, as you can see here on the screen, and I want to just ask you a question, sort of give you a scenario here as we get started. Have you ever been on a team? You ever been on a sports team? It could be a team of any kind, but I'm going to focus in on sports. But you ever been on a sports team and you're playing a game and you're getting really close to the end and it's a really close game and somebody makes a mistake. And that mistake leads to your team losing. I don't know about you, maybe you've been that person that made the mistake. I've been in that position, and what I wanted when I made that mistake is I wanted my teammates to come beside me and to come alongside me and just say, hey man, it's okay. It's all right. We'll try to improve and get better. Don't worry about it. We're not going to hold that against you. Okay? That's really that's would have been great to hear. Okay? Can you imagine if you made a mistake that led to your team losing a game and it was all your fault? And what would you want your teammates to say? I imagine you'd want them to say something similar to what I was looking for, right? If your teammates if they did tell you that, they did say, hey, it's okay, it's all right, you tried your best, you did the best that you could, we'll practice, we'll get better, we're not going to hold it against you, let's just move on. If they did that, that would be an example of your teammates showing you grace, okay? Grace is something, it's a gift that you give to somebody that they didn't deserve. Like when I made the mistake when I was playing basketball, it was a mistake it was totally my mistake. I turned the ball over. It wasn't like somebody else's fault. I dribbled the ball right off my foot and it went right out of bounds, and we lost the game because the other team got the ball back and we had no opportunity to win after that. And so it was completely my fault. I couldn't blame it on anybody else but me. I didn't deserve for my team to be like, oh, it's okay, we can move past it, we'll do better next time, or we'll work on it, we're not going to hold that. They didn't have to do that. That wouldn't necessarily, that would have been fair if they would have sort of continued to help me understand that that was my fault, right? But they showed me grace, right? And so today we're talking about not in the context of a team and a sports game, but we're talking about it in the context of Jesus' life. Jesus shows grace to others all throughout his life here on earth. So here's just sort of a simple summary of what we're talking about today, okay? Grace means giving something good to someone who doesn't deserve it. Remember, I made the mistake at the end of the game. I didn't necessarily deserve for my teammates to forgive me and to move past it, but it was awesome that they did, okay? God gave us grace through Jesus Christ. God gave us grace through Jesus Christ by making a way for sinners to be right with him. And we talk about this to some extent every single week, all right? But this week we're going to focus in on that idea of grace and how Jesus showed it in his life here on earth as well as in his death and resurrection. All right, here is our memory verse for today. I'll read it out of the book. It's up there on the screen. Ephesians 1:7 says, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace. So it's a little bit of a longer verse, but it's a great verse to help us to remember and to think about God's grace and how he has shown us grace in Jesus Christ and in his life and in his death. All right? So without further ado, there on page 164, we have a question. Okay, Mark 2, verses 13 to 17. Now, I'm not going to read all these verses because there's 4 or 5 there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to answer the questions for you. But hopefully you've worked through this a little bit at least. And maybe you can think about some questions as you move through here to talk to whoever's at home about. But Mark 2, Jesus sees somebody sitting at a table at a tax booth. And that person's name is, the first blank there, is Levi. Okay? And not only does Jesus talk to Levi, and shows him grace by talking to him, because tax collectors sort of worked for the government, but didn't work for the government at the same time. And the government there was the Romans, and these people were not the Israelites. The Jews were not in Rome; they were in Israel, right? So they should have been dealing with the Israelite government, but Rome had come and had taken them over. The Romans had. So the tax collectors were kind of viewed sort of as shady characters, or people that worked for somebody that nobody liked, kind of deal. So it was weird, it was odd that Jesus would talk to them, let alone what he continues then and does. The next part of what we read in Mark 2 is that he shows grace by eating with both tax collectors and sinners. Your book says in here that it talks about how tax collectors or publicans were usually bad men who stole money from people. So they're working for the Romans, so they were taking the tax from the people, which is okay, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes they took more than they should have. And so that was where it became a bad thing, and tax collectors got this bad reputation, okay? And so we have just that opportunity there to see Jesus is showing grace just by simply talking to them and eating with them. I'm looking in the book and I'm realizing that the next passage that I have is not the next passage that's in the book. So I missed that one on the PowerPoint, but we can look it up real quick. So Luke 23, 33, and 34. So let me read that. 23, 33 through 34 says, "When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him," speaking of Jesus, "along with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left." And what's a criminal? Criminal is somebody who's broken the law, right? Somebody who's done the wrong thing. Was Jesus a criminal? No, we've talked about that, right? He was perfect. He wasn't crucified because he broke the laws. He was crucified because he was claiming to be God, and people didn't like that. They didn't believe him. Okay? So verse 34 then says, Jesus says, "Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing." They divided up his clothes by casting lots. So Jesus is there, and he's being crucified. He's being crucified on Good Friday there. That's what we remember on that day, right? But Jesus is already forgiving those that are doing it to him. They certainly didn't deserve that, right? They were crucifying Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who had done no wrong. But yet Jesus is saying, hey, let's God forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He's giving them a gift that they didn't earn, that they don't deserve. And so the blank there would be that Jesus showed grace by forgiving all the people who crucified him. Okay, the next one I do have on the PowerPoint, it's Acts 10:35. So the greatest gift of grace that we see ever is Jesus Christ dying on the cross for you and for me, because he didn't have any sin, because he never broke any rules. He never broke the law. Jesus Christ is one person that never should have experienced that kind of death, that kind of punishment. He never should have had to deal with that. But not only did he do it, he did it for you and for me in our place as a sacrifice for us. And so there's grace that we don't deserve. I didn't deserve Jesus to die on the cross for me because I am a sinner, right? Remember, we've talked about that. The Bible tells us that everybody has sinned. We've all fall short of perfection, of holiness, which is exactly what Jesus Christ did when he came and he died, and he still did it for us. So we see God's grace in Jesus Christ, in his death. And so there in your book, it's talking about what gifts you receive when you trust in Jesus Christ. So Jesus died and rose again, and he defeated death. And so if we place our faith in him, the punishment that I deserve because of my sin, I can have forgiveness of. I can have grace cover over that sin because of what Jesus has done. All right? And so I have gifts from God because of that trust and that faith in him, because of what Jesus has done. So Acts 10:43, I'll flip there, I'm not that far away, tells us that All the prophets testify about him that everyone who believes in him, speaking of Jesus, receives forgiveness of sins through his name. So, what gifts do you receive once you trust Jesus Christ, according to Acts? Forgiveness of sins, right? We just mentioned that. And then the same question there, what gifts do we receive when we place our faith in Jesus Christ? According to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 12 or 11 and 12. And this is the testimony: God has given us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. He who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son does not have life. So you could say life, or you could say eternal life, okay? Life or eternal life. Either one would be good. Because of our sin, we've been separated from God. We deserve that punishment. Remember, sin is anything we think, say, or do that doesn't please God. And so, because of that sin, we've been separated. And God not only has sent Jesus Christ to die on the cross for us, but he has given us all these different gifts that allow us to be in a relationship with him and to be in heaven with him. So we don't have to be separated forever from God, which would be death, right? We get eternal life, which means we get to be with God forever in heaven after we are no longer here on earth in our physical body. All right. So we're talking about a lot of stuff. A lot of it is stuff that we've talked about before, but it's all really helpful stuff to help us to think about how God has shown us grace in Jesus Christ, how he's given us gifts that we don't deserve. No way do we deserve them. All right. So I'm going to put up this last slide here. We've already talked about the first two questions pretty much, and I think we've answered them pretty well. But the last question is, how can you show grace to others this week? I want to just challenge you with that this week. How can you show grace to other people this week? Remember, you're not doing it because they deserve it. You're not doing it because they earn it. You're doing it because Jesus has shown you grace, and he has called you to show grace to others. That's one of the ways that we communicate about God without just walking up to people and saying, hey, do you know who Jesus is? We get to show them by showing them grace. And we certainly can talk to them about God as the opportunity arises. So that's the challenge for this week. I'm praying for all of you that are following along, and even those of you that aren't. Anybody that might be watching this video, if you have any questions, please reach out. Talk to mom or dad or whoever's at home. And hopefully I will see you back next week for the next lesson of the TNT online lesson. Next week we'll be covering section 3.7, and then the week after that becomes a review week. So remember, that's a really hard week. We have to say all the sections from 3.1 all the way through 3.7. So you can already start practicing and working up towards that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.